What's up, world? This is America. My name is Hobson McCain. I'm here with my boy Mark.
My name is Mark A. Redmond. I don't like who introduced me. I introduced myself.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I took that a little bit. I was a little bit forward with that. but so this is week 2, episode 3. This is our international news segment. There's been a lot happening in terms of international news this week, um,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the G7 summit. Used to be G8. We're gonna talk about that.
They call it E6+1
Yeah,
right now.
they called it G6+1. We'll also get into that. Um, so there's a lot to talk about. Um, Donald's about to meet with Kim Jong Un. This is just crazy week in terms of international news. But what we're going to talk about is the G7 summit. If you don't know, G7 it stands for Group of Seven. It's an annual meeting of world leaders where they discuss global issues and take a nice picture. It's photo op. Talk about how they can progress the world economically. This is generally, well, not generally, but it's the biggest economic powers in the world supposedly. The members are Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US. The presidents of the European Council and European Commission are also there to represent the EU. Now, in 1988, Russia was added to G7, making it G8. And in 2014, there was a vote to remove Russia and implement sanctions on them because they had annexed Crimea from Ukraine. And basically, what annexing means is they just absorbed them and took them into Russia. Like they're now a part of Mother Russia. So um, now this was a big deal because Crimea was supposedly a territory of Ukraine, and there was agreements and treaties in place that said that Russia was not supposed to mess with any of Ukraine's stuff. And Vladimir Putin said,
I'm going to do what I want to.
I'm going to take Crimea because that's what I like to do. I don't know. That's not really what he said, but I think it's also important to point out that our good old buddy Vlad did say that, proposed that Crimea voted overwhelmingly to join Russia, Crimean citizens. The U.S. and the EU, they say that this was illegitimate because there were Russian forces in Crimea, and so it was kind of a, forced voting, I guess. So, Mark, you wanna?
We in the U.S. know better than anybody that voting can be misconstrued. 20, what was it? Whenever our election was, I want to say 2016. 2016, Donald Trump lost the popular vote. But because of the way that our election is set up, we vote for electors, yada, yada, yada. They didn't do what they were supposed to do on paper because Donald was not supposed to win. But that's neither here nor there. Historically in the U.S., this is a fun fact that was news to me. When I heard it at Lehigh, I thought that it was false when I first heard it. Black men actually got the right to vote in 1865. Did you know that, huh? But I'm going to tell you what they did when they let us vote in 1865, which is
the grandfather clause and all that stuff.
Abolish slavery. There's ways to manipulate the vote to still say that you let everybody vote and, say that the vote was legitimate while you manipulate it. The way that they did it in the U.S. was they had people that were, coming out of slavery. And in slavery, you're not supposed to be able to read or write. And they let us out of slavery, allegedly. And then they imposed these new laws. Like, after they said that we could vote, they imposed, literacy tests and
the grandfather clause.
History tests and stuff about the U.S. That, bro, that's not allowing us to vote. That's what that is. And I feel like in Russia, or in, where was it, Crimea? I feel like in Crimea, that is very, very real possibility that something similar happened. Because if there were indeed Russian forces in Crimea, those Russian forces were not there doing nothing. They weren't there just for fun. They were doing something, and for them to actually be able to organize an election that they weren't even supposed to be having, That sounds a little felonious to me. I ain't gonna lie.
Now,
You're not even supposed to be there. Who organized this vote? Who organized this election? Like, where did this come from? Because it wasn't from Ukraine, and Ukraine owns it. So the whole election was BS, and it's illegitimate, like they said, because that's like me going to your house and taking my friends there, or maybe there's your friends there, but I'm in your room, and I'm voting about what color I'm about to paint your room. That's not how that's supposed to work, because it's your room. It's yours. And I can't tell
I like
you
the
what's
color
supposed
of
to
my
happen.
room.
I like the fact that other people said that it was okay. It's yours. Those are the rules. That's the law. So just because there was a vote that may or may not have even been legitimate is irrelevant, because there was no vote to be made.
Now, all of this is being said because um, President Donald Trump proposed that we reinstate Russia into G7, making it G8 again. He said they threw Russia out. They should let Russia come back in because we should have Russia at the negotiating table. Now, this is interesting for a multitude of reasons. Um, so let's start off with the fact that in our economic segment last week, we talked about the tariffs that Donald Trump had imposed on our allies.
Mm-hmm.
This obviously caused a bit of a rift between our allies and ourselves. Now, yeah, there's just a lot of tension. These were agreements that we had been working with for some years, and it was time to renegotiate a few of them. But the implementation of these tariffs just rubbed a few of our allies the wrong way. Now, we all know that Donald Trump and his administration have been getting investigated for collusion with Russia in the 2016 election. It has been publicly declared that Russia did meddle with our election. They were trying to affect our election. But Paul Manafort just got indicted on 25 charges of obstruction of justice in relation to the collusion with Russia. Paul Manafort was Donald Trump's campaign aide or campaign manager. Pretty sure campaign manager. But anyway, so that shows that there has been some sort of collusion with Russia. Now, Donald Trump hasn't been officially charged with anything. They don't. Just like we said last week, there's evidence and there's reason to believe that Donald Trump probably wouldn't have been involved in any collusion with Russia just because of how outspoken he is and how unable he is to, restrain himself from saying certain things. So keeping him in the dark about something like that isn't far fetched. But when you're meeting with six other countries that presumably all agree that Russia isn't necessarily anybody's friend, especially in the G7, because Russia has over the past few years done a multitude of things that have gone against sanctions and agreements that G7 and other world organizations have made. So Russia clearly has no respect for global rules or global sanctions or anything like that, or anything that other countries are trying to implement on Russia. Russia does what Russia wants to do for Russia's benefit. So,
sounds real familiar.
Yeah, it does, but that's another conversation. But so for President Trump to present this at the G7 summit, when he knows that they're about to be talking about the controversial tariffs that he implemented, and he knows that most of these leaders aren't really his biggest fan. This is another instance of Donald building a bigger divide amongst us and our allies. And that's not good for future future presidents who might be trying to make deals with uh, people in the EU or Canada or Mexico. Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, he agreed that Russia should be reinstated into G7. And I presume that this is because of Russia's economic power in the world, and this is a economic summit. But obviously, there's reasons for concern about this. Like,
if you want them to come to a summit where y'all are going to make agreements as a group, y'all are going to make laws, not laws, but y'all are going to discuss tariffs and, regulations globally. Russia got kicked out because they didn't care about global sanctions and global rules. So why would you invite them to make rules that they are most likely not going to follow? It makes no sense to me unless you're Donald Trump, and without Vladimir Putin, you wouldn't be president. Now, even if he didn't work with him personally on a one-on-one basis, if he wasn't the one that did it himself, he still benefited from it. And without it, he probably wouldn't be president. To me, it's a bit confusing as to why, out of all of the countries in the world, out of all of the world leaders, the one that says that he's not friends with Russia, that he's not friends with Vladimir Putin.
That he's been Russia's worst nightmare. Quote. That was a quote.
Bro, I was doing research for this show, and it was like the 32 most outlandish things that he said at the summit. He said like a week ago that, well, not a week ago, but he said that he hasn't talked to Vladimir Putin in several weeks or something to that effect. And then they have a quote from Vladimir Putin saying that him and Donald Trump speak on a regular basis and that they met a couple years ago at some business event or something to that effect. So Donald Trump has consistently lied about his relationship with this man, Vladimir Putin, to the point where Vladimir Putin isn't even trying to help him out with the lie anymore. Vladimir Putin is basically throwing this man under the bus and doing what he wants to, and Donald Trump is trying to be a very strong leader and do what he wants to, and he wants Russia to be there for some odd reason, even though.
And it is interesting because this is a meeting of economic powers, and as we know, Donald Trump does have business ties to a lot of different countries, including Saudi Arabia, including Russia. His daughter has ties to China, business ties in China. So, a conflict of interest has to be talked about. And he has consistently treated Russia with, John McCain said it best. You've been giving our adversaries the I don't know exactly the quote, but something like you've been giving our adversaries the leniency that should be reserved for our closest allies. That's I'm not going to quote that because that's not exactly what he said, but that is the gist of what he said. You can look up the quote and you will see that I'm not,
making it up.
Yeah, I'm not even really bending it at all. That's exactly what he said.
Last show we went out on the limb and explained when people were, just saying outlandish stuff about Donald Trump because we don't support, people just trying to bash the man. If he did something wrong, we're going to talk about it. Just like if Barack Obama was president and Barack Obama did something wrong, we will let you know that he did something wrong too. Exactly. Because Barack Obama did indeed do wrong as a president. So, if you're the president, it's fair game. We're going to talk about you because you're representing us. And that's just the facts of it. You're making us look bad right now, trying to be best friends with Russia, even though they done cheated in our election and undermined our democracy. You want to be friends with them. To me, un-American. But
unpatriotic.
But, I'm unpatriotic because I don't believe in everything the president does. I thought that was the point of America. I thought that was the point of democracy, to speak your piece. We have checks and balances and stuff for a reason. Checks and balances come from people having different interests and different affiliations and different goals. Donald Trump doesn't really want to hear that. Nobody that supports Donald Trump really wants to hear that. They just want to hear support for him. But they were doing the exact opposite when Barack Obama was in office.
Yeah, so
democracy.
Basically, to summarize, Donald Trump is worsening our relationships with our allies. He's deepening the divide, and he's making it a difficult task for whoever's going to be our next president to rebuild these ties and rebuild these economic relationships and just personal relationships that have been in place for decades. So we're gonna end that. We're gonna end the international news segment there. If you guys agree, disagree, have suggestions, comment below. Share with your friends. Share this video. Like the YouTube page. Subscribe. We're gonna keep the content coming out. So thank you guys for tuning in.